What would the fall of society in a situation like the zombie apocalypse actually look like? Welcome back to Lost in Games Unscripted, the series where I talk about pretty much whatever I feel like talking about at any given time. And in this particular video, that happens to be the fall of society in general and what that would look like, because a lot of media, I think, gets it very, very wrong. Now, when I say that, a lot of people out there are going to be like, what do you mean? Obviously, everybody's in it for themselves and it would just go crazy, right? Because that's what you see when you look at things, and it doesn't matter where the media comes from, whether it is something like The Walking Dead, which I've talked about a lot lately, The Last of Us, where you see the fall of society with something like the cordyceps virus, or the cordyceps fungi, not virus, I'm sorry. Or if you look at something that is more kind of post-apocalyptic but still society-based, like The Hunger Games, where you see a completely rebuilt society after the fall, and what that kind of thing could look like. In all of those scenarios, you see the worst in humanity in a lot of ways. And they all have this premise, this idea that if society were to collapse, the worst of humanity would come out, and the best, the people that see the best in the world and see the best and want to help others, those people would be the first ones to die. And that's especially true when you look at something like the Walking Dead universe, right? Everywhere you turn in the Walking Dead, there's you have the moral compass that shows up and says, this is the right thing to do, and then they wind up dying. And you have people arguing constantly about the right way and the wrong way to do things. But in reality, that's just not the way it would go. It's easy to take a stance and say that, well, people are just evil and horrible and mean to each other, right? The blue button, red button controversy that I talked about a couple weeks ago is a good example of something like that, where a lot of people think that, well, most people would hit the red button, so I'm going to hit the red button to survive. In reality, though, people aren't as selfish as you think they are. And there's studies to back that up. There have been studies done to talk about things like how people react following natural disasters, following things like wars or famine, earthquakes, floods, tornadoes, hurricanes, you name it. These massive things that come along and destroy entire cities at times, city blocks or cities, or entire countries destroyed in war. And in the moment, you feel like you're seeing the worst of humanity. You feel like things are just really bad, and that how could they ever be any better? But then when you look back on it, you realize that neighbors were helping neighbors out. People were coalescing around. They were looking out for the less fortunate among them. They knew who in society needed something, and they were taking them food. They were bringing them into their homes. They were doing the right thing to help them out. So, in a situation like the fall of society, there are three major pillars, that are three major points that we're looking at as far as what to expect, and those can be found really in all facets of humanity. Going back to the earliest Homo sapiens, when you go back to the very beginning of humankind, right? And the very first people were hunter-gatherers. They were kind of on their own. You had small groups. There wasn't a whole bunch of them running around at the same time, and they were kind of just doing what they could to survive. That was very early humans. Over time, they wound up forming villages and towns and cities, and society kind of grew from there, and you wound up becoming more agrarian, where you have, like, you're growing your own food, you're keeping your own animals, you start making your own stuff, and better tools and better weapons and better equipment, and you keep improving and getting better and better and better. Technology increases, time goes on, to eventually where we have the modern day, where you have a lot of great technology, and you have, what used to take 200 years ago. If you wanted to send a message from New York to LA, which before LA existed, but bear with me here. If you want to send a message across the country, it would take days, maybe even weeks, depending on what happened along the way, right? That same message goes in milliseconds now. It's the same thing for around the world. You wanted to travel from the United States or from the colonies in the 1700s back to Britain, you're taking a few weeks minimum at sea. And now you can do that in a few hours. You hop on a plane and you're flying halfway around the world in the time that it used to take to just start kind of planning the voyage, right? So people forget how far we have come and what we have seen and where humanity has built itself up in stages, right? And that same thing would happen even if all of society just collapsed tomorrow. People might initially start with a more fight or flight kind of thing. It's the same thing that happens in the immediate aftermath of a disaster. It's fight or flight. It's figure out the situation. How do I want to handle this? What's going on? What's happening around me? Once that subsides, once you kind of get a grasp on what's going on, the next stage kicks in. The next stage is start getting some survival stuff going. And that survival stuff is going to be groups bounding together and coming in and saying, we'll help you out. Let's help each other. Let's build. And it's going to stay in communities, right? You're going to have your small communities. You're going to have, whether it's a neighborhood within a larger city that bands together to try and protect what they've got and help each other out, or a small town where people are coming together and saying, hey, I got you. We will help you out. We got blankets. We got food. We got water. We can help you out. We can work together, right? That's going to happen more often than not. Yeah, you're going to have groups. You're going to have some people that are going to form up and just try to take advantage of the fall of society. But those people aren't going to last, because what's going to happen is those people are going to run into the wrong group and they're going to get their asses handed to them. That's just the way it's going to work. The idea of the ruthless raider, of the type of person that just kind of runs over everything, the Mad Max Fury Road kind of future, that's just not realistic when you look at how people actually are. And I'll link the studies that I've talked about in the description below so you can go look at them yourselves. But the fact of the matter is when people are put in that situation, they want to survive. And then over time, we get to that final stage. And that final stage is kind of a starting to thrive again. You know, you've adjusted to the new situation. So you went from, if you look at the modern world, right? And we have things like technology. We have the internet. We have grocery stores you can go to get your food. We have fresh water available easily. We have indoor plumbing. We have all this stuff. That stuff all goes away. And you have the first couple of sections where you're trying to figure things out. But the third section is the new normal. And that new normal is going to consist of typically the community that you have formed and the people that have banded together, that are growing food and helping each other out. And they're kind of working together and doing things to help to make sure everybody can survive and thrive. So if that's the case, if that's the reality, why do we view things the way that we do? Why is everybody so pessimistic about what could or would happen in these situations like a zombie apocalypse? There's a few really good reasons for that. One of them, many of you probably like me read Lord of the Flies back in school, right? When I was in middle school, we had to read Lord of the Flies, and we got to watch the old movie too, the black and white one from like 1960, right? And that was a really interesting take on things. And it was this idea of you have these kids that are stranded on this desert island, and they're going to devolve into these like tribalistic factions where they're going to want to kill each other, right? That was the whole idea behind Lord of the Flies. And on the surface, you're like, oh, damn, that must mean that people would actually be like that. In reality, there was actually a situation that was reminiscent of Lord of the Flies that happened in the 1960s. 1965, a group of kids from the boarding school in, I'm going to butcher this, I know, it's Nuka-Alofa. It's in the Pacific Ocean. They were part of this boarding school, and they didn't like the food at the boarding school. They were angry because the food just sucked, and they were like, we're going to get our own food. So they actually stole a boat, took a couple supplies, nothing too crazy. They didn't plan on being out long, and they go out into the ocean, and they wound up falling asleep, and they woke up to like pounding waves, and things were just really bad. They were on the water for like 7 or 8 days. And then they saw an island, and they get to this island, and it turns out it's an abandoned island. It used to be inhabited. The people that had lived there were actually taken for the slave trade. They were just all loaded onto a boat and taken away. So there was some of their civilization from a couple hundred years prior was still there. So, but they didn't have a whole lot. So they had to build their own shelter. They had to start growing their own food. They were on this island for 15 months by themselves. This group of teenagers. And they had a whole thing going. They worked together cooperatively to make things work. They didn't devolve into madness or going crazy and fighting each other. And you would think, you see teenagers nowadays, you're like, oh my God, these teenagers, they're going to kill each other if they're in a situation. No, they work together because humanity in general, we want to help each other. Most people have empathy. Most people are care about their fellow human being. They care about their neighbors, right? Even if they don't actively show it in the way that you think that they should show it. I had somebody point out the other day on a video that, people don't give blood often enough. So obviously they would all be evil people that would press the red button. That's just not the case. People do good when emergency situations come up, when things get bad, when shit hits the fan, people show up. They will drive from out of state to help out people who are suffering from flood damage. They will donate blood in a catastrophe. They will rush to the Red Cross to donate blood because they know that the need is big, right? This happens mainly in catastrophes. It doesn't happen so much when things are kind of calm, but when catastrophes happen, you see it happen. It's a big deal. And it's because we have this innate desire we know that if we look out for others, we want to be in that position. If we're stuck in a bad place, we want somebody to look out for us. That's generally how it works. It's the survival of the fittest idea, but it's the idea of like, if I help you out, if I'm ever in a situation, I hope somebody will help me out. Glenn from The Walking Dead season 1 has this perfectly. When he tells Rick, because Rick's like, why did you help me out? You didn't know who I was. I was in this tank and I was basically a lost cause. Why did you do that? And he says, I would hope that if I was ever in that position, that far gone, somebody would help me.
Back at the tank, why'd you stick your neck out for me?
Oh, a foolish, naive hope that if I'm ever that far up shit creek, somebody might do the same for me. Guess I'm an even bigger dumbass than you.
And that's the situation that most people would find themselves in. They would say to themselves, damn, I'm going to help this person out. I'm going to do right because I want somebody to help me. But also, there's also a response that happens in the brain when you help people. You feel good about it, right? It's an innate thing that, like, it can be given to charity. It might be volunteering and going someplace and helping to build a home for somebody. It might be when you do good acts and you help other people out, it feels good. And that would be the case even in a zombie apocalypse, even in the fall of society. That would still be the case. Humanity would still want to prevail. And in that situation, the last big part of this all has to do with what would we do to survive? Because, we have this idea, especially from the zombie apocalypse media, that like society falls and that's it. There's nothing left. But there are plenty of people out there who are woodworkers, who are iron workers, who are farmers, who have these skill sets that could help rebuild things. And not all of those people are going to go away right away. Some of them will die off in the early stages, but there's going to be a lot of those people that are going to stick around and be able to help other groups, right? They're going to use their skills, their trade craft to help rebuild things. And even in a situation where you don't have that, there's libraries full of books. Nobody ever mentions the fact, in these zombie apocalypse shows, I have not once seen a group go to a library and grab a whole bunch of books. They're always raiding for food and stuff. But there's books out there that will help you learn this stuff. There is ways to kind of figure this stuff out. And libraries would be a perfect place to do that. And that would happen, At the end of the day, that's really what we wind up with. Society falls, a zombie apocalypse happens, and people rebuild. We go through the stages, we go through the initial figure out what's going on. Let's get things straight. Then we go through a transition period where we're trying to figure out the new norm and trying to figure out how to handle things and setting up what we're going to have to deal with. And then we have the adjusted norm. And that adjusted norm is going to be probably, maybe we don't have electricity. Maybe we have to figure out life without that. What people have lived without electricity. Life wasn't always great. Before antibiotics, indoor plumbing, electricity, things weren't necessarily as good as they are today for a lot of things, but we made it work, and we would do it again. It's just the facts. That's the way it would pan out in the end. And it annoys me and it frustrates me to no end to see these media that portray this. And part of it, I think, developed in the last 100 years or so. If I had to guess, 150 years maybe, especially because the United States, for all of its flaws, has had a major impact on the world, economically, but also just in general, as far as like mass media and what people think, perceptions, that kind of thing. And in the United States, we've gone through a civil war and we've participated in 2 world wars. And those 2 world wars, they had a bigger impact on Europe because that's where they happened, and places were torn apart in Europe. But we have this idea, this mentality, because of those world wars and because of that civil war. We think, well, we've seen the worst in humanity, so we know what people act like, we know what people are capable of. So we kind of jump to the next thing of, well, if they are capable of this, that's where Lord of the Flies came from originally. The idea of, if people are capable of locking each other in internment camps or in concentration camps and killing masses of people off, if they're capable of that, well, that's obviously where things would go. But what they fail to realize is that wasn't what happened. That wasn't the end of it. That was a moment, and people rose up against that thing. People fought against the Nazis. People fought against the oppression, and they fought against the evil. And in the end, the evil fell. It never stays gone forever because humans are just wired at times to be stupid and be evil. And it always comes back. But every time we beat it back, we good triumphs over evil, not just in stories. Sometimes it takes a long time and a lot of people suffer. Sometimes it's not the best situation. But at the end of the day, tyrants always fall. Dictators always lose. Evil always comes last. And even in the zombie apocalypse, that would be the situation. So take that for what you will. It's very relevant to the modern day and what we've seen in the world, because we've seen some horrific things in the past few years. And I think sometimes it's easy to forget, especially since the pandemic. The world has seemed like such a different place since the pandemic. And it's easy to forget that there is still good out there. And even during the darkest times in human history, even during the darkest times we've had recently, people step up and they help each other out. They're there for each other. They care for their fellow citizen. And that can't be overstated. And it needs to be remembered, and it needs to bring some hope to the world, because regardless of whether we have a functioning society in 10 years or we fall to the zombie apocalypse, people are going to survive, life is going to go on, and things are going to get better. That's all I got for this one. I just wanted to talk a little bit about that because it's something that it's important to me. It's been bothering me to see, as I've been going through. I've been watching a lot of The Walking Dead show in preparation for some videos I'm working on. I've got The Walking Dead game. I've played The Last of Us, which is like all of this apocalyptic kind of stuff. And I started playing Cyberpunk, which I'm going to be talking about that in a video of itself. Just I couldn't finish it because of the situation, but I want to hear your guys' thoughts in the comments below about your view on humanity. Did anything I say maybe give you a little bit more hope than you had before? Let me know in the comments down below. If you liked the video, hit the like button, subscribe to the channel for other stuff that I've got coming out. And of course, you can always join the Patreon or become a channel member if you want to help the channel out in other ways. I'm always trying to create new stuff, and I'm always open to new ideas. So if you join those things, and you can help me kind of shape things and make suggestions for the future of the channel. While also getting your name on the screen, early access and all that kind of stuff. So that's all I've got for this one. I want to thank you all for watching. Everybody have a great rest of your day, and I will see you in the next one.